Hi, it's me, Brody, again on the internet for my wonderful audience of 15 sentient beings and probably maybe some bots as well, talking shit at the camera. So I've got nothing else better to do with my sad little life in this mental institution. But I've got some very interesting literature to read today. As ever, I've completely plagiarised it all from the internet and majoritively, if that's even a word, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. And so with that caveat, let's begin reading some research which is entitled The Mirage of Infinite Ascent, an investigation into neoliberalism, financial fragility, the limits of growth. There's me in the corner. Hello. Not losing my religion. So, part 1, the neoliberal architecture, a benevolent mask and a toxic core. Can I move this floaty widget thing just to sort of there as well? So it says, the economic history of the last half century is not merely a chronicle of markets and money, it's the story of the ascendancy of a specific constructed ideology known as neoliberalism. You might have heard that word bounded around. It's kind of one of those ones that no one really knows what it means. I didn't know what it meant until I got a book on it. My old school teacher recommended, by George Monbiot. So to the layperson, the term often appears as a sort of nebulous catch-all for modern capitalism, which is kind of what it means. You know, perhaps it goes on to say a pejorative hurled by critics at the excesses of the wealthy. However, a forensic investigation reveals neoliberalism to be a distinct engineered project, a linguistic omnivore that has swallowed the political landscape, reframing the very concepts of human freedom and social organisation to suit the imperatives of the market. It is an ideology that promised a utopia of efficiency and individual liberty, but has in practice delivered a regime of systemic fragility, staggering inequality and economic peril, as you might find out if I read on. The advantageous facade, so conceptual bigness and the rhetoric of liberty. So it reads, to understand the durability of the neoliberal order, one must first grapple with its intellectual seduction. It did not conquer the global imagination solely through coercion. It won because it offered a compelling, unified theory of the world. Its primary advantage and the source of its political power lies in its conceptual bigness. Bigness isn't really a word I've ever used. I probably won't use it again. I might do. But neoliberalism posits that the market is not just a mechanism for exchanging goods, but the supreme information processor for all human activity. It's a grand epistemological claim that suggests that no human mind or government planner can ever know as much as the price mechanism. A bit of a weird concept, but that will make sense in a minute. So in a journalistic sense, the advantageous traits of neoliberalism are often marketed as the democratisation of consumption and the maximisation of personal liberty, but by dismantling trade barriers, privatising state industries and deregulating finance, proponents argued they were unleashing the magic of the market, as they referred to it in some contexts. The narrative was intoxicating. The state was portrayed as a lumbering, inefficient dinosaur, while the private sector was agile and an innovative engine of progress. This movement successfully branded itself with a benevolent mask of wonderful sounding words like freedom, rights and choice. For the generation emerging from the Cold War, neoliberalism framed the ability to choose between competing service providers not merely as an economic convenience, but as the ultimate expression of political freedom. It promised that by shrinking the state, individuals would be liberated from the serfdom of bureaucracy. The expansion of global trade was sold as a rising tide that would lift all boats, pulling millions out of poverty through the diffusion of technology and capital. In specific contexts, such as the rapid industrialization of parts of Eastern Asia, the integration into global markets did indeed correlate with significant material gains, lending credence to the neoliberal promise as being something which was good, sort of good and bad. There's different sides to it, Furthermore, it goes on to say neoliberalism offered a pragmatic solution for what they call stagflation crises of the 1970s by prioritising the control of inflation through monetary policy rather than by the full employment goals of the Keynesian era. That's another economist, you can Google him. It claimed to offer a path to stable, sustainable growth. The independent central bank became a high temple of this new order, governed by technocrats who were theoretically insulated from the messy, inflationary populism of democratic politics. Sorry, I had to pause there. I thought somebody was at my door. The next paragraph's entitled The Toxic Reality, Fragility, Accumulation and Disaster Capitalism. So, however, beneath the polished rhetoric of efficiency lies a financially toxic reality that's fundamentally destabilised the human experience. Critics and historians argue that the neoliberal project was never truly about freedom in the abstract, but about the restoration of naked class power following the capital accumulation crises of the 70s. Then you've got what's titled Systemic Fragility and Financialisation, which doesn't probably mean much to you, but the article does. So what it says is that the most glaring toxic trait of neoliberalism is its inherent economic fragility. It's not really stable. By championing the free flow of capital and the deregulation of banking, specifically, that's kind of the main one that fucked everything up, the system replaced the relatively stable industrial capitalism with the post-war era with the volatile casino capitalism. This shift unmoored the economy from the production of tangible goods like steel, cars, crops, tethering it instead to the ethereal and volatile world of speculation, derivatives and debt. Google derivatives. There's a great website, right? If you just put all the money, if you Google, right, this term, put all the money in the world into one chart, there's a Market Watch page, and it's fucking terrifying. I might even show you at the end of this, right? Because it's about derivatives. That's what this subprime mortgage crisis was all about in 2008. It's really simple, and it's fucked up too. The result's been a system prone to recurrent crises of liquidity and over-investment, necessitating periodic massive state-managed rescue operations to save it from itself. The 2008 financial crisis serves as the definitive case study of this toxicity. The deregulation of the financial sector, championed by neoliberal architects as a way to distribute risk and increase efficiency, instead concentrated risk and encouraged reckless gambling. When the House of Cards collapsed, the very state that neoliberals scorned was called upon to provide trillions in bailouts. This reveals a central hypocrisy of the order. It demands the state to be small when it comes to social welfare, but massive when it comes to protecting asset prices. Profits are privatised, but catastrophic losses are socialised, so a bit of a juxtaposed, ironic parallax there. The disaster capitalism complex, this bit's pretty good. So it says the implementation of the neoliberal policies has often followed a ruthless pattern described by journalist Naomi Klein as disaster capitalism. Crises, whether natural disasters like Hurricane Katrina or financial insolvencies like the bankruptcy of Detroit, are not treated as tragedies to be healed, but as market opportunities to be exploited. A bit like Donald Trump wants to fucking make Gaza into a, Venice Beach. Fucked up, isn't it? Like in New Orleans, the public school system was hollowed out with extraordinary speed in the wake of the hurricane to make way for private charter schools. In Detroit, the city's bankruptcy was used as a pretext to dismantle social welfare programs, slash pensions to satisfy creditors. Fucked up. This trait reveals a predatory reflex where the public sphere is viewed not as a communal asset, but as a territory to be conquered and monetised. So inequality and social atomization. So financially, neoliberalism has produced a staggering economic equality. The promise that wealth would trickle down has been empirically discredited. Instead, the mechanisms of the market have acted as a vacuum, sucking wealth upwards. The deregulation of labour markets and the attack on the unions have severed the link between productivity and wages. What's that done? What that's done is lead to like a decades-long stagnation in middle-class incomes, while executive compensation has gone through the roof. Perhaps the most toxic is the movement's tendency to create a culture of commodified selves by extending market logic into every sphere of life. Education, healthcare, dating, neoliberalism forces individuals to view themselves as businesses in a constant state of competition. This leads to social atomization, the erosion of community trust, and culture of cruel optimism, where individuals are conditioned to believe that their structural economic struggles are just like personal failures or of effort or mindset, like not endemic problems in society. The alchemy of instability, fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. You might have heard me say this shit a lot, but it's like I can't really emphasize it enough. Got a really sore ear today. So I had someone shove something in my ear when I was asleep. It really hurts. Anyway, to comprehend why the neoliberal order is so prone to volatility, one must look under the hood of the engine driving it. The modern economy runs on a specific fuel mixture, so the fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. This combination acts as a potent accelerant for economic growth, but, and it's a big but, it also creates the combustible conditions for recessions, hyperinflation and systemic collapse, which are really not good things that you want in any domestic infrastructure of your country, governed by whoever your leaders are. The mechanics of the magic trick, how money is made. So the vernacular of the layman, in the vernacular of the layman, the creation of money in our current system is akin to a magician pulling a rabbit out of the hat, except the rabbit is credit and the hat is a bank ledger. The pervasive myth is that the government prints our money. In reality, only over 97% of the money in circulation is developed in developed economies, not as physical cash minted by the state, but as digital numbers created by commercial banks when they create issue loans, right? So fractional reserve banking is pretty simple. Refers to regulatory permission for banks to hold only a tiny fraction. Historically, it's not actually 10%, but that's good. It's often 10%, though sometimes no percent in modern regimes like the US post 2020. So you put 100 million in the bank, they actually don't have to have any of it. They've got assets, right? Banks have got assets and demand deposits. The assets are like shit you owe them for your credit card, and demand deposits are shit that they owe to you because you put your money in the bank. But some of them haven't got it, and most people only take out fucking speakers making noise, weren't they? Most people don't take out more than 10% what they got every day on average across the board, so they'll never be out of pocket, But if you did have a run on the bank and everyone said I want my money, then they'd be fucked. They haven't got it. Anyway, consider the mechanism. When you deposit £1,000 into a bank, the bank does not lock that money into a vault for safekeeping. Under fractional reserve rules, it's permitted to lend, say, 900 quid of that money to another customer. The borrower takes that 900 quid and deposits it in their bank. So, go from Barclays and then puts it into Lloyds, which then lends out 810 of it to a third person. Here's the illusion. So you still see 1,000 quid in your account at Barclays, right? If you went from Barclays, Lloyds, Santander, whatever. If you check your account balance, and the second person still sees 900 quid and the third sees 810. The reality, the original 100 quid of base money has been multiplied into 2,710 quid of broad money. The bank has effectively created new money out of thin air, backed only by the debt obligation of the borrower. Right, that's sort of complicated, but you will get it if you watch some stuff on YouTube and generally kind of read up on it. Fiat currency, this entire structure rests on a foundation of fiat currency, right? Unlike commodity money, like gold coins or silver coins, fiat money has no intrinsic value. So it's not a claim on a fixed amount of physical wealth, nothing to do with like Citroens or Peugeots or anything like that. It's just a word which means currency backed by nothing. So its value is derived solely from the fiat, which is Latin for let it be done, of the government, which declares it to be legal tender and demands that taxes to be paid in it. This detachment from the physical world allows for infinite flexibility in monetary policy, a feature neoliberal prize, but it also removes the physical brakes on debt expansion. So the engine of recession, the boom bust cycle, while this elasticity allows for rapid economic expansion, it introduces severe structural flaws that inevitably lead to recessions. The interest gap and the debt treadmill, so fundamentally toxic of this system, lies in the mathematics of interest. When a commercial bank creates money by issuing a loan, the principal, like we just kind of talked about, it creates only the principal, right? It doesn't create the money that they need to pay the interest, right? And that has got to come from somewhere, and that basically comes as a metric from public services. Simple as that. So the vast majority of the money supply is created as debt, and there is by definition always more debt owed to the banking system than there is money in the existence to pay it. I know that sounds fucked up, but it's true, because the money's getting created as a debt in the first place, and then they want extra interest on the debt. So that's where they have to take it from roads, schools and hospitals, and we live in a shithole like everywhere. Eventually it's crap. So yeah, there's more debt owed in the banking system than there is money in existence. This creates a perpetual game of musical chairs. To pay off the interest on old loans, the economy must continuously expand and take on new loans to create enough new money to service the old debts. This creates a systemic growth imperative. The economy must grow exponentially just to prevent the system from collapsing under the weight of interest obligations, right? And this isn't usury, by the way, just to be clear. Like, there is a differentiation before anyone jumps in with that assumption, or someone sat next to you and says, "Oh, I've read about this in religion." It's nothing to do with usury. It's not dissimilar, but it isn't usury, right? And Google why it's not. I can't bother to explain right now. When the rate of new lending slows due to market saturation, risk aversion, or external shocks, the money supply contracts. So there's literally not enough money in the system to pay the debts. Borrowers default, collateral values crash, and the economy enters a recession. This is not a bug, it's a feature of a system that requires perpetual debt expansion in order to function. Malinvestment and the Austrian critique. From the perspective of the Austrian School of Economics, the financial toxicity of this system is rooted in the distortion of what they call price signals. Don't ask me, ask Google. The interest rate is supposed to be the price of time, a signal of how much savings are available for investment. When banks create credit ex nihilo, fuck knows what that means, out of nothing. I've never heard of that. I've read a lot of economics books, but they push interest rates artificially low, below the natural rate that exists in a free market of savers and borrowers. This false signal tricks entrepreneurs. It makes long-term capital-intensive projects appear kind of profitable when they're not, right? So it fuels like an artificial boom, a bit like a sugar high, characterized by speculation and malinvestment in assets like housing or tech stocks, when the inflation caused by this credit expansion actually forces central banks to raise rates. And that's when that sort of illusion shatters. The bust is the economy's painful, necessary attempt to liquidate these bad investments and reallocate resources to reality. Neoliberal policy, once again, we're getting back to the core of this issue and this kind of article, by constantly intervening to prevent the bust, prevents cleansing process, piling bad debt upon bad debt. Hyperinflation, shit times if you've got hyperinflation, the death of confidence. So the flip side of the recessionary coin is hyperinflation. Because fiat money has no physical limit, there's an immense political temptation to print a way out of debt crises. So when governments or central banks inject massive amounts of liquidity to bail out fragile financial sectors, a hallmark of neoliberal crisis management, they risk diluting the currency, and that makes it worth less, right? So the money supply grows significantly faster than the supply of real goods and services. The result is inflation. However, Hyperinflation is a psychological event as much as a monetary one. It occurs when the public completely loses faith in the state's ability to maintain the currency value. History provides grim examples, from Weimar Republic to Zimbabwe to Venezuela, where the magic of fiat currency reverses and the money in one person's pocket rots in value by the hour. In a neoliberal context where financial stability is paramount, the reliance on quantitative easing, which is creating more money to support asset prices, constantly flirts with this sort of catastrophic boundary. The political economy of posthumous achievements. So the interplay between neoliberal ideology and debt-based money has created a political environment where economic growth is marketed as the ultimate metric of success, regardless of its cost or its sustainability. It's actually like what you don't want. You really don't want economic growth with fiat currency and fractional reserve banking, right? Because the more money that you create, the more you have to return in interest, because it's all debt. Not the Bank of England creating coins and notes, having seigniorage is what it's called when they get like a bit of money out of creating a £50 note. They get seigniorage, but it's like politicians across the spectrum have adopted the rhetoric of the growing economy as a panacea for all social ills. It's sold as the tide that lifts up boats, the engine of opportunity, and the guarantor of national strength. In the neoliberal era, GDP growth is presented as the primary indicator of national health. However, in the context of the current financial structure, this growth is often a posthumous achievement, a zombie metric that looks alive but is powered by the cannibalization of the future. The politicians market GDP growth as a triumph of their administration, often ignoring this growth is fueled by deficit spending and credit expansion that future generations must repay. It's a form of intergenerational theft, actually, where current prosperity is purchased with the credit card of the unborn. The achievement is posthumous. It's posited because the bill comes due long after the politicians have left office or even passed away, leaving the wreckage of austerity for their successors to manage. This is kind of what's happened with America and the UK for the last 100 years, or 50 anyway. The mathematical impossibility of exponential growth. This is how it's fucked, right? The most damning indictment of this model is not political, but mathematical and physical. The current economic model demands exponential growth, right? A constant percentage increase every year to sustain these debt repayments. On a finite planet, this is impossible. There's just only so much gold. There's only so much fucking water and fish and trees and shit like that. Like the commodities market, they trade fucking frozen concentrated orange juice, FCOJ, on Wall Street, and on the New York Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, and fucking hell, everyone wants fucking orange juice made from concentrate every day, especially the Yanks. But it's impossible for that to keep growing, It's a bit like what happened with Soap Bar. Does anyone remember, right? I'm going to just jump back on the camera. Like, if anyone remembers, right, here's a little lesson in urban vernacular you might understand. If you're like between the age of 20 and 40 and you live in Britain, right, you might remember this really shit hash called Soap Bar that we used to get, right? And it's a perfect example of kind of free market economics breaking down. So there used to be this hot hashish is a cannabis product, right? It's like brown blocks of stuff that you crumble into a cigarette, and it's cannabis. It's made from cannabis plants. Now, everyone was importing lots of hash in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, people like Howard Marks and various other people. And they were all in competition with each other. And they would buy it by the kilo and they would sell it in smaller parts. And they would make lots of profit out of that. But they were in great competition. They're getting it from Afghanistan and Lebanon and Pakistan and Morocco and India in bits of furniture. But there's a glass ceiling, right, of like how there's so many people investing in it that it reached a level where the economies of scale, if you want like a ton of hash, they can do that. Like, they can get whole farms to do that. But if you want like 25 tons of hash, it doesn't matter where you go in the world, they just can't provide that amount. And if economies of scale, it's like it's cheaper the more you get. You buy a multi 48 pack of fucking Walker's crisps, you pay less for them than you do for a single pack of crisps. Yeah, that's called economy of scale. So we ended up, the only way, I mean, we kind of had austerity hash. They called it Euro hash because it was like all the drugs were coming in from Europe, I mean, the cannabis, and they had no way of, they were trying to undercut each other, make it cheaper, yeah? And so the only way they could do that is by putting like adulterants into the product, making it crap. You know, there's a fucking Goldie Looking Chain song about soap bar. It's just Google soap bar. It's this horrible low quality, which basically just appeared because people couldn't buy enough of it for it to be cheap enough that they could undercut each other and have the share of the market. So the quality just went down, down, down through the floor, and people ended up smoking shit with like beeswax and bits of plastic and henna and tires and fucking God knows what. Ghee, like clarified butter, like it was rank. It was really cheap, but it was really horrible. And that is that physical impossibility. You can't keep on. Every resource has a limit, and like a price ceiling, you know. So the rule of 70 and planetary limits. That's what this bit will probably talk about. What it does, yeah. To understand the tyranny of exponential growth, you can use the rule of 70, right? If you divide 70 by the annual growth rate, you get the doubling time of the economy. So that's a growth rate of 3% a year. It sounds a bit complex, but just bear with me, right? So I'll put myself in the little circle, there you go. So considered a modest success by politicians, it means the economy doubles in size every 23 years. It might not sound bad, but that is fucking diabolical. So over the course of a single century, a 3% growth rate results in an economy that's approximately 19 times larger. Now you might think 19 times more jobs, 19 times more profit, 19 times more tax. No, so 2 centuries continued for another century, it becomes 400 times larger. Now, this exponential curve clashes violently with the laws of physics. Economic activity requires energy and materials. There's like only so many oranges in the world. There's only so much fucking hash you can buy before you have to start making it into fucking shit hash that makes you cough your guts up and is full of weird stuff that shouldn't be in there. And that's kind of what's going to happen with our, like, everything. Cars, fucking products, food, everything will just start to become shit eventually. Not like, you know, literally poo, but you know what I'm saying. The exponential curve clashes violently, as I've repeated, with the laws of physics. Economic activity requires energy and materials. Even with theoretical efficiency gains, second law of thermodynamics, second law, dictates that energy use generates waste heat, right? So, for example, physicists have calculated that at a 2.3 annual growth rate in energy consumption, the waste heat alone would boil the Earth's oceans in approximately 400 years. 400 years is a long time. There'll probably be a lot of confounding variables and political change between now and then. Hopefully they'll do something about this fucking monetary system, but you know, maybe they won't. It's not a climate change scenario dependent on greenhouse gases. It's literally a thermodynamic inevitability of the energy use itself. There's a sustainability paradox as well. So therefore, the neoliberal promise of infinite growth is a lie. The concept of sustainable growth touted by politicians is an oxymoron. You know, we're attempting to fit an infinite curve into a finite sphere. Good way of putting it. The result is not just environmental degradation, but the mathematical certainty of a crash. The debt obligations that assume future growth will eventually encounter the hard wall of physical reality, depleted of topsoil, scarce fresh water, exhausted mineral deposits, leading to a Minsky moment. That's a bit of a cliched phrase, but it means asset prices, which how much stuff is, basically collapses because the underlying physical economy can't support the financial claims made against it. So if you want like to sell your hash really cheap, you've got to buy loads of it. And if you can't buy loads of it, you have to sell it for really expensive or make it really poor quality. Both those things are bad. The $346 trillion bar tab, that's a lot of money. Read that again, 346 trillion. A trillion is 1,000 billion, right? A layman's metaphor for global debt. To understand the sheer scale of the mess created by fiat currency and fractional reserve banking, we must step away from academic jargon and step into a metaphorical local pub. So here's a metaphor for you. So the metaphor of the global bar tab. Imagine the world is in a neighbourhood pub, right? In a world of full reserve banking, where money is a physical commodity just like gold. You can only buy beer if you've got cash in your pocket. If you've got no cash, you drink water. The economy is limited by the physical gold in the room. But in our global pub, in brackets, the fiat fractional reserve system, the bartender has a magic notebook. So what he does is creation. When you want a beer, bartender doesn't check your pockets. He just simply writes $5 in his handbook under your name. Crucially, I don't know what's done in fucking dollars. It knows I'm in the UK. Yeah, never mind. It also writes $5 on a napkin and hands it to the brewery to pay for the beer. Because everyone trusts the bartender, the brewery accepts the napkin as money, and the bartender has just created a fiver out of thin air. If you saw that happening in a pub, you would think, this is fucked up, I'm in the wrong job, why am I not making napkins into $5 notes? And that's literally what they do when they extend credit. So the catch, obviously, is the interest. The bartender charges interest for every £5 beer that he gives you. He writes down that you earn £5.50 next week. And then there's the trap, the terrifying flaw. The bartender created a £5 napkin for the beer, but he never created the 50 cents napkin for the interest. So the money to pay the interest literally does not exist in the pub. So you end up on like a treadmill. The only way for you and the other patrons to pay off the interest is to order more beers. The bartender writes new tabs for new beers, new napkins. You get where it's going, new money, and you can compete for payoff of your old interest, right? And this has been going on for decades. The patrons are drowning in beer they can't afford, scrambling to borrow just to pay the interest on the drinks that they had last year. The tab in the magic notebook has now grown so large it exceeds the value of every drop of beer, every table, every chair, and the building itself. The process has led to a global debt figure that's almost unfathomable. As of late 2024 and heading into 25, the Institute of International Finance, they're very boring, you can read that if you want, and other monitoring bodies. So the figure, this process has led to a global debt figure that's almost unfathomable. As of late 2024, heading into 25, the Institute of International Finance and other monitoring bodies report that the global debt stockpile has reached a fresh record high of approximately 346 trillion. To put this into British pounds, as a representative exchange rate of 1.25 US dollars to Great British pounds, this equates to roughly 277 trillion quid. It's a lot, isn't it? This verifies the staggering scale of the burden. This mountain of debt is the accumulation of decades of the magic notebook. Money creation, a claim on the future labour, energy and resources of humanity, and the physical world that may never be able to deliver. The Tower of Basel, the Bank of International Settlements, and the Fourth Reich, the reality of technocracy. At the apex of this global financial system sits the secretive and misunderstood institution, the Bank for International Settlements, in Basel, Switzerland. To understand how the global debt machine is coordinated, one must look at this central bank, four central banks. The role of the BIS. So central banks club. The BIS provides something called intraday clearing services, which act as a counterparty for central banks. In simple terms, it's the plumbing of the global financial system when the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, and the European Central Bank need to settle transactions with each other or coordinate regulatory policy, such as the Basel III Accords on capital requirements. They do it here. So the BIS operates with unique legal status. Its buildings and assets are inviolable. exempt from Swiss law and immune to seizure, which is quite fucked up. They function like a sovereign state, or like even like the United Nations or the Holy See or sort of thing, you know. It's the shadow of Walter Funk and the Fourth Reich. There's this fucked up conspiracy theory you might have seen on the internet that the Bank of International Settlements is the subject of an intense, often lurid, it's a good word, conspiracy theory. Most notably the idea that it is a Fourth Reich, an instrument designed by Nazis to continue their economic domination of the world after the military defeat of the Third Reich. Now, while the Fourth Reich idea is a conspiracy theory, the historical facts that birthed it are genuinely disturbing and require careful disentanglement. It is bullshit, but there's a lot of shit on the internet, you know. The reality of collaboration. So the conspiracy theories are rooted in the undeniable fact that during World War II, the BIS proclaimed neutrality, okay? So they weren't taking sides, but that was a stance that allowed it to function as a financial lifeline for the Nazi regime. So the board, between 1993 and 1945, Bank of International Settlements board of directors included Walter Funk, Hitler's Minister of Economics and President of the Reichsbank, alongside British and American bankers. Funk was a key architect of the Nazi war economy, and he was, obviously, as you would expect, convicted of war crimes at Nuremberg for his role in the plunder of Europe. There's a bit of gold, but it's not 277 trillion quid's worth. The BIS famously facilitated the transfer of looted Czech gold to the Reichsbank in 1939 after the Nazi occupation of Prague. It continued to accept gold payments from the Reichsbank throughout the war, gold that was often melted down from the teeth, jewellery and personal effects of Holocaust victims, which is fucking dark, exterminated in the camps, and that's where they got this gold that was used by the Nazis to buy critical raw materials for neutral countries to fuel their war machine. So debunking the myth, here's why that's bullshit. Most of it, not the sort of acquisition of gold, but like the kind of, the conspiracy theory says that the BIS is the Fourth Reich. It was established by Funk to control the world, and this is historically inaccurate. The BIS was established in 1930 by Germany before the Nazis consolidated total power, originally to handle the reparation payments imposed on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles. So the Young Plan, it was treated by a consortium of central banks, including the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve, not solely by general German interest. So, survival. The BIS survived the war not because it was a Nazi stronghold, but because the global financial elite, like key figures like John Maynard Keynes, believed that a neutral clearinghouse was essential for the reconstruction of Europe. So at the Bretton Woods conference in 1944, the US delegation, led by a guy called Harry Dexter White, pushed to liquidate the BIS because of its affiliation with Germany in the Second World War. So Keynes fought to save it, and the liquidation order was eventually reversed in 1948. The BIS is not a secret Nazi bunker. It's something perhaps more banal and quite pervasive, more like a fortress of technocratic neoliberalism, going back to the start of this project or research paper. So it presents the view that the stability of the financial system, the clearing of debts and smooth flow of capital is a supreme good that supersedes moral considerations. It did collaborate with Nazis, not out of ideological affinity, out of a moral commitment to order and banking neutrality. I don't think that, I think that's kind of immoral. If you don't, you've got something wrong with you. Fucking Nazi wants to open a bank account, you don't agree to it on the basis of banking neutrality, you know? You've got to condemn that shit. Today, it serves the interests of global finance capital, enforcing the rules of debt-based systems upon nations regardless of their political stripe. Economic terrorism, structural adjustment loan. So the Bank of International Settlements is a quiet sort of clubhouse where the rules are written, and the International Monetary Fund and World Bank are enforcers on the ground. Their primary weapon is the structural readjustment loan, SAP. In engaging unambiguous terms, one could frame the operations of structural readjustment programs through the lens of a conspiracy theory. They're often cited by critics in the global south as economic terrorism. So the narrative of this supposed economic terrorism, so if you can imagine a desperate homeowner, right, developing nation as a metaphor, whose house has been damaged by a storm, often a crisis caused by the global commodity price fluctuations or colonial debt, whatever, confounding variables, they go into the only banker in town, which is the IMF, right, the International Monetary Fund, for a loan to fix the roof. The banker agrees, but with conditionalities. He says, I will lend you the money, but you must one, fire your security guard, like get rid of the military and the police spending, and you must stop buying medicines to help people, and that's, sell your car, privatise state asset. Austerity is basically what it's saying, public service cuts. That's what everyone's getting pissed off about. In about 2011, there was a massive protest in London all about austerity. I was there, and it was lots of people out, teachers, doctors, lawyers, solicitors, NHS workers, fucking everybody, firefighters. This is the essence of structural adjustment. So the trap, developing nations are often trapped in a cycle of debt. To avoid bankruptcy and being cut off from international markets, they accept these loans. The weapons, the conditionalities, force nations to restructure their economies to suit the interests of foreign creditors and corporations. They're forced to slash subsidies for food and fuel, leading to riots and starvation. Privatise essential services like water and electricity, often sold to Western conglomerates, and shift their economy from feeding their own people to exporting raw materials to the West to pay off the debts in hard currency. Why is it called terrorism? That's a big extreme. It's a big scope, that word, isn't it? But the critics argue it is literally a form of warfare. So by forcing governments to gut their healthcare and education, to privatise debt service to Western banks, these policies result in measurable death tolls, higher infant mortality, lower life expectancy, malnutrition. It effectively strips new nations of their sovereignty, converting them into resource colonies without the need for military occupation. The conspiracy is the allegation that this is an accidental incompetence, but a deliberate strategy to maintain global south in a state of dependency and extraction. The economic terrorism burdens these states with problems inherent in the loan design, focusing on repaying external creditors at the expense of domestic population survival. That's how it is. Here's a chart. I'll make it into a Google Doc. I don't like charts on these videos. It takes too long. I can't even see 42 minutes already. Right, in conclusion, the unpayable ledger and the finite earth. The investigation into neoliberal financial architecture reveals a system that is mathematically destined to fail and socially designed to extract. We're living in an era where the economy has been decoupled from human well-being and physical reality. The exponential growth required to sustain a debt-based fiat currency system is colliding with the hard, non-negotiable boundaries of the planet. Politicians continue to market this growth as a posthumous achievement, the legacy of prosperity that is actually a memorial to their own myopia. They celebrate using rising GDP while the foundations of society, social trust and environmental stability and financial solvency just get fucked completely, like from the inside out. So that global figure, 277 trillion quid, that's a few quid, isn't it? It's more than a lot, like Chasing Status in that album said. Quite a good album, or it's not cool anymore, but it was good when it came out. And yeah, 277 trillion really is a lot. But it isn't just a number, it's like a monument to a broken promise. It presents claims on future energy, labour and resources that can't be honoured without destroying the biosphere or like debasing the currency to worthlessness. The austerity imposed on nations to service this debt is a form of structural violence, a rigid enforcement of contract over human life. And if you view the BIS and the IMF as pragmatic stabilisers or engines of neo-colonialism, the trajectory is clear. They fit like a fucking glove. The system built on the requirement of infinite expansion with a finite space is not a permanent state of affairs. It's a slow motion train wreck. Like, it's never going to work. It's just going to go, dry. It's like setting out for 1,000-mile drive with like £5 worth of petty in the tank. You know what I mean? It's just not going to work. It's just, you're not going to get there. Further investigation, a syllabus for reform. I just thought I'd add this bit at the end. For those seeking to understand alternatives to this toxic paradigm, following resources provide a roadmap out of the debt trap and towards monetary systems grounded in reality. So 97% owned. I know the guy, I think he was called Mike Howarth, and a lot of the footage in 97% owned is at a March 2011, March the 26th, I think, protest I went to with lots of people about public service cuts, and he did a lot of his footage for that documentary with people from Positive Money, some people I knew very well, have done for years, and I totally support Positive Money. If you haven't heard of it, go on their website, give them a direct debit, read some of their shit. It's really interesting. So 97% Owned is a brilliant film. It's probably the best one. You can watch it on YouTube, but it's like copyrighted, but it's got like a female voiceover. If you just type 97% Owned into YouTube, you'll get a few hour-long documentaries. The one that's like really nicely produced with like a female voice over it, you will understand and recognise, or you can just get it from somewhere legal or whatever. But I don't think they'd mind if you watched it for free. You know, they want people to know. It's a definitive documentary explaining the mechanics of money creation by commercial banks and the internal workings of the Bank of England. There's this great bit in that, right? If you know who Robert Peston is, he's like works for the BBC, and the leader of the campaign and Robert Peston went to the Bank of England, right, when I think it was like Mervyn King was running it then. Anyway, they went there and they said, can you give us like an interview, like a 2-minute statement on how money is created? And he just said no. The Bank of England is not going to tell the people how money is created, because they would all probably feel a bit like you're feeling right now. So this got to be bollocks. How is this true? You know, forget the conspiracy theory bit, but like, it's really fucked up that we just owe 277 trillion, and there isn't enough of anything to ever pay that back. So I mean, what we're going to do? Just like, you know, it's like your cat brings you a mouse in, and it's like, you know, we're only going to survive if it brings 1,000 mice in the next hour. It's just a complete clusterfuck, mathematically, physically, you know. The Money Masters 1996, I haven't seen that, so that shows my ignorance. Says it's a deep dive into the development of central banking, manipulation of the money supply. Princess of the Yen, I haven't seen that either, based on the book by Professor Richard Warner. This film explores how central bank policy, specifically the Bank of Japan, can engineer boom-bust cycles and social transformation. Four Horsemen is good. It analyses the modern financial system through the lens of empire, exploring our fiat currency and inequality signal the decline of the current order. The Spider's Web, Britain's Second Empire, an investigation into how Britain transformed from a colonial power to a financial power through offshore tax havens and financial secrecy. Further reading on the monetary reform and sovereign currency. So, Lost Science of Money is quite a good one. Stephen Zylanger, I used to be friends with him on Facebook years ago. He's like part of the American Monetary Committee or American Monetary Reform Party or some shit like that. Beardy dude. I think it might have even been at the Bromsgroves. I went to this like retreat with the conference, like a weekend conference in about 2011. I don't think Stephen Zylanger was there, but anyway, he's good, interesting guy. Check him out. Modernising Money by Andrew Jackson and Ben Dyson. Detailed proposal for how to transition from fractional reserve banking to a sovereign money system where money is created by the state free of debt. Chicago Plan Revisited, IMF working paper by Michael Kumhoff and Jaromir Binez. I hope I pronounced that right, guys. The institutional analysis proving that the full reserve banking would eliminate bank runs and drastically reduce public debt. Then they've got Debt, the First 5,000 Years by David Graeber, anthropological exploration of debt's role in human history, debunking the myth of the barter and exposing the moral evidence of debt. Then just this last one, Where Does Money Come From? By Josh Ryan Collins. Definitive guide to the UK monetary system, establishing the fact that banks create money ex nihilo. This investigation concludes that while the current system is entrenched and it is not immutable, the toxicity of neoliberalism, fragility, inequality and unsustainability are design choices, not laws of physics. Understanding the mechanics of the Magic Notebook is the first step towards closing the ledger on a system that's mortgaged the future to pay for the excesses of the present. And that's me, guys. Thanks very much for all your help and support. It's not a very nice day today. It's a grey day outside and I'm fucking bored, but hope you found that interesting. And if you didn't find it interesting, then you should be interesting, because it's really important stuff. Cheers.